Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. Welcome to the June 2018 Clutter Conversation webcast. Our topic today is vicious circle. Clutter is a symptom and a cause of negative emotions. I'm your moderator, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas. Before we start, Gayle, let me just remind those who've already joined us, if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please look for the raise hand feature in Zoom, and I'll be watching that, or you can just chat the message to me. Look for the chat button along the bottom of the Zoom interface. I'll be saving up your questions for the right time to ask them or to let you ask them. If you turn on your microphone and or camera, we'll let you ask your question or make your comment yourself. Okay, over to you, Gayle.
Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Today, we're going to talk about the vicious circle of working with clutter and the negative emotions that come from that. Anybody that deals with clutter at some point is going to have those distressing emotions come up, unpleasantness. And when you notice the clutter, it starts the process. If you notice it, perhaps you feel guilt because you see something in the pile that is something you were supposed to do, right? Like there's the cable box that you're supposed to return, or there's the sweater that you're supposed to mail to your sister from when she was visiting before. Sometimes the stuff that triggers guilt. Sometimes you're going to feel anxiety because the idea of facing the pile and knowing what to do about it, planning the project, is super overwhelming. Sometimes you feel shame when you look at it because it's, oh my gosh, how could I possibly have let it get this bad? How did it get this out of control? What am I going to do about it? Fear comes up, fear of having to deal with it, being overwhelmed with how big the project is. That's a big one. Lots of people feel overwhelmed when they look at the clutter. So all of those negative emotions get in the way and keep you from getting started. And if you hang on to them long enough, sometimes it triggers depression. A lot of the people that call me, they get to the point where it's gotten so bad that now they're depressed about it all the time. And they can't make any forward motion because they're feeling so depressed. So if you let it go long enough, and if you hold on to those negative emotions long enough, you may end up at the point of being depressed, and then you're really stuck because depression really shuts you down and keeps you stuck to the couch for sure. So those emotions definitely get in the way. So what's the first thing? What happens when you start to feel all those feelings is it stops you, right? It stops you in place, and you're not able to move forward at all. It creates a hesitation. You look at the pile and you go, ugh, I don't want to do something. And your brain kicks into high gear big time because it is designed to go, oh, she's hesitating. Why? There must be something going on. And it starts to pile on more negative response. Like it wants to feed your sense of distress and hesitation because it thinks that it's trying to keep you from doing something life-threatening and scary. So if you hesitate, your brain registers that you've hesitated and it starts to help you stay in place. Like, don't jump over that cliff. That's a bad idea. If you're hesitating, there must be a problem. And so your brain sort of works against you in that place. And it's not really a helpful way to move forward. We then hesitate, we stop at the pile, we look at it, and a lot of times we just walk away. So when you walk away, then what happens? Now you're like doubling down on it, right? Because now you have to go back again another time and you look at it and same thing. You hesitate, you stop, you question, and you turn around and walk away. And you end up in this constant going up to it, freaking out, walking away circle, and hence the vicious circle part of this process. It's sort of like an airplane that's flying over the airport in a circle and never allowing to land. And at some point, you're starting to worry about whether you're going to run out of fuel. It's a process of shutdown and circular motion, and in the end, you can't get anywhere in that place, right? So we have to kind of break through that process. And when I work with clients, half of what I'm doing is tackling this stuff without your negative emotions attached. So I come up to your piles and I'm not distressed about the passing of your mother, and I'm not distressed about your divorce, and I'm not distressed about how big the pile is, and I don't feel guilty that it's there, and I'm not grossed out because it's dirty, and I don't have any of those responses, right? To me, it's just a project. So I walk up in an emotionally neutral way and just start working through the stuff. I start plowing through, I mow it over. And sometimes it's, the client is often shocked by my ability to walk up and just immediately start doing stuff. And it's a measure of, here's what it's like when you're able to do it yourself and not be blocked by your own emotions about it. So sometimes I'm just modeling behavior, and that's enough to allow people to go, oh, I really can step past my fear, step past my guilt, step past my shame, and get in motion. But most of the time, those emotions are too overwhelming, and the stuff is creating a serious barrier to action, particularly if you suffer from anxiety disorders or you're feeling a lot of guilt or shame. Those things shut you down in a big way. And trauma, for instance, from the loss of a loved one, a parent, a child, loss of a job, death of anybody in your immediate family or friends, all of that stuff creates that mental barrier that makes it hard to be in forward motion. And you're going to need some help to take some action, is what I'm saying here. If you come with those blocks that are sort of stepping in the way in between you and your action steps, you need a few little tricks to get you over the hump and to deal with those emotions at the same time. It's really something that has to happen simultaneously. So let's give you a few tips today about how you can take some small steps despite your negative emotions, and hopefully those will allow you to make forward motion sort of go. You can honor how you feel about them, but still make a little forward motion around. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling guilty about it, if you're feeling shame about it, like this is a mess and it shouldn't be a mess, this is a mess and I feel bad that I haven't done anything about it, those kinds of emotions are really just a matter of, you just got to end around them so that you can go, yeah, I feel embarrassed, I feel bad, but I can still get the work done. If you're feeling grief, anxiety disorder, things that are a little bit stronger and more triggering, you're going to have to be a little bit more gentle with yourself, but we'll talk about that today. So let's go to the first tip. The first tip is that you want to set a timer. So approach the work. You know that you're afraid, you know you're distressed, you know whatever, fill in the blank, whatever your emotion is today. But if you go and get a timer, kitchen timer, there's a product called Time Timer, timetimer.com, and we'll post that into the comments later. They make a little clock that has a colored sleeve, so that when you set the timer for 20 minutes, you got 20 minutes of color sleeve. And as the time elapses, the little sleeve gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So you see less and less of a block of color, and you can watch the time go by. The thing about setting a timer is, for the moment, for the 15 minutes or 20 minutes that you're setting it, you're surrendering control to the timer. So it's one less thing that you're having to stress out. You're not having to say, okay, I need to manage my time. I need to, how long am I going to work? I need to be judging myself about how long I'm working. You're like, scratch all that. You're just going to set the timer, and the timer is going to tell you when to stop. So you can take that off the stress table. And it's a finite amount of time that sometimes you can talk yourself into. Okay, this project is going to be 75 hours and I cannot deal with it, and I can't work 8 hours, and oh my God, there's no way I can deal with this. But if you just say, okay, I'm just going to do 20 minutes, like the timer says that, oh, he found the timer. Awesome. There's the product. And so they have big ones, but they also have little bitty tiny ones. So don't, shop through all their products, because there's various sizes. That allows you to pick one. See, there's a kind of big one with the little kid, but then there's little bitty flip ones that are smaller. So there's all sorts of price ranges, and they're really useful. The point about those is, if you set the timer for the 20 minutes and you allow yourself to surrender to, this is my parameter, I'm only going to do that amount of time, and then when it's done, I'm allowed to release and go do something else. I'm allowed to go away. And so you can sort of make a bargain with yourself that you only have to stay focused for 20 minutes. You only have to spend 20 minutes on this project. And then you can do the happy dance and you can run. And sometimes that's a way to allow yourself to say, okay, at least I did 15 minutes today, at least I did 20 minutes today. I don't have to do the whole thing, and so it's okay. And I think that that gives some permission to do it in small bites. It gives you a little bit of control over the time, so you don't like go down the rabbit hole and wake up, 6 hours later and you're exhausted and you're halfway into the room and it's, overwhelming. So those timers really give you a way to parse it out in small bites until you're happy. The next idea is ask for help from a friend or a family member or someone else who has clutter issues. You can also go pro and ask and hire a professional organizer like me, but whoever you ask has to be somebody who is non-judgmental and has a degree of detachment from the emotions about the project. Like they can't come to the table with really strong emotions about your stuff and your pile. So I say that because sometimes people's friends want to be helpful, and it's because they're really having strong emotions about it. They're like, oh my God, this place is a wreck. I have to, I'm compelled to come and help you deal with this. And so if that person shows up, they're dealing with their own set of strong emotions, and it's not going to be a good mix for the two of you. You're bringing your own negative emotions to the table, and so whoever helps you really needs to be emotionally neutral, which is why a professional is so helpful, because I'm going to show up and I'm going to be totally emotionally neutral about whatever's in the room. Doesn't matter. And sometimes your friends can do that, and sometimes your family can do that, but typically a child, a parent, a spouse, there is no way that they can be emotionally neutral about this stuff. Your family is already being impacted by the piles. They're having their own response to living with those piles and having to walk around with them and deal with them and think about them. And so asking that immediate family member to come and deal with it is really a recipe for disaster. If you want to deal with that much negative emotion, if you have that much negative emotion yourself, you got to create the space to deal with your emotions and not have somebody else dump in on top of it. So choose your person wisely. I know parents tend to say, I want my kid to come and help me. It's like, yeah, except that's like the worst partner ever. That kid is looking at your stuff and they know that they are going to have to dig out this house when you're gone, and they are looking at their own list of chores and their own clutter and their own to-do stuff, and in the end they're going to come to it with oh my God, I don't want to deal with my parents, I don't want to deal with my mom's stuff. They're going to be really resistant. And so choose somebody who can be kind and neutral while they help you, and then you can have a partner. And sometimes having a friend that's able to mimic a professional is enough to hold your hand and support you while you go through the stuff that's distressing. Okay, so the third tip. Do we have a question, Ed?
No, I was mentioning also that meetup members, and some of our meetup group members have partnered to help each other.
Oh,
and
right,
so,
right.
looking for
people
someone,
that come to the meetup.
Looking for someone who shares the problem, but can also be objective about your stuff can be very
Right?
helpful.
Because I've heard a million people say to me, I can help my friends all day long. It's so easy for me to go help them do it, but I can't do my own. Like, that's totally true, because you're emotionally neutral about somebody else's stuff. You're only upset about your stuff. And so if you guys can sort of trade support, that'd be awesome. Find somebody else who is able to be in that place with you, and you can help them with theirs, and they can help with you, and both of you guys will be neutral, and that's for each other, and that's great. And that's true. They have the meetup people, some of them have done that together. Awesome. Anything else? We cool?
That's
okay.
it for now, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so the third tip to help you get past this is the idea of creating physical separation between you and the stuff that is really hard. So I'm imagining, when somebody's parent dies, when there's, they get divorced, they lose the job, and they end up with a bunch of stuff that reminds them of something that they consider to be really traumatic and distressing. So usually it's a room stuffed full of a bunch of, here's where all mom stuff went when we emptied out her house, and this is the stuff that I kept, and I just couldn't deal with it, and we slammed it in the garage or the shed or the junk room or the storage unit or wherever, right? And it's a big pile. and this is typical. It's not unusual. It's the worst time of your life, and you're trying to cope, and the best you can do is get all the boxes you're going to save and go put them somewhere. And when it's time to face them again, it's a really big pile. And the idea of dealing with all of that, like that's a whole room full of physical representation of distress. And so sometimes it's better to open a box, take out a handful, get your timer and set the timer for 20 minutes, but take that handful of stuff and walk out of the room where the stuff is stored. Don't work in that room. Just take a little handful and go somewhere else. Go sit in the kitchen table, go sit on the couch, go sit in the bedroom. Go somewhere else from you, so you're physically not sitting there looking at all the rest of the project or even all the rest of the box. You're just looking at the handful that you have. Set the timer for 20 minutes, go sit in the kitchen table, and then you can flip through that very small quantity of here's cards, and here's the toothpaste tube, and here's mom's glasses, and here's the, it's just a little handful of random stuff. And you can make some choices about this small collection. I'm keeping the glasses. Like I kept my mother's glasses because they're turquoise and they totally remind me of her. And for me, those little glasses are in an open box on a shelf, and it's like a little memorabilia thing to look at her turquoise glasses. And so I've also had people tell me things like, I can't throw out her toothbrush. Well, so now if you have a little pile and one of those things is the toothbrush she was using, you can probably throw the toothbrush out now. It's easier to do it in small bites and make, here, I'm keeping the glasses, I'm throwing the toothbrush away. Here's her partial teeth, you know what I'm trying to say. It's like a denture piece. Here's a little tooth piece, and it seems like it should be kept. And you can have a conversation with yourself about, this is a keepsake, but do I really want to look at these teeth? Maybe that's not the thing. Maybe I can just let that go after all. And so if it's only a little bitty bit, you can have the 10-minute conversations you have to have with yourself about, what am I going to do with the partial? What am I going to do with the toothbrush? What am I going to do with the toothpaste tube that is now 2 years old and nobody can safely use the toothpaste? Like, it's expired and we need to let it go. So you can make those toss, keep decisions in small bites. The timer is going to go off. You can stop. And if it's super distressing, you can walk away and not go get another handful. But if you've managed to get through the little pile and the timer went off and you got to the bottom, you know what you're doing, and you still feel okay, you can go back to the box in the room where the stuff is, grab another handful, go back to the kitchen table, do it again. The idea is just to do it in increments and let the timer release you from your project at an artificial time point, so that you just have to make it until the alarm goes off. And whatever's not done, whatever you haven't handled, you can pick up and go back and put it back in the box until the next time you want to sit down with the timer. Partitioning it out in those little slivers and removing them from where the rest of the stuff is helps remove some of the overwhelm and the pressure that people feel from looking at the whole, like, oh my God, I'm so upset, here's the toothbrush, and there's 150 other items that are going to make me cry. But if you can separate yourself a little bit, you're less likely to be triggered by everything you're sitting in, and you might be able to make a little headway. Just a thought, and particularly a good one when your pile is triggering a whole lot of grief and loss, and that shuts down people faster than anything. Or anxiety too. If you're feeling a lot of anxiety, then walking away from the stuff and dealing with it somewhere else is a good idea. So this fourth tip came from a YouTube notes conversation I had with somebody who wrote to me and said that, she spends all of her time looking at pictures on Pinterest of beautiful rooms, and then she feels really terrible because she wants it to look like the Pinterest pictures, but her room is such a wreck and she can't imagine it ever being there. And after talking with her, I realized that comparing herself to the Pinterest pictures was just making her feel terrible about herself. I think in the end, having a goal of, I want it to look like the House Beautiful magazine, or I want it to look like Martha Stewart's magazine of a beautiful, decorated, lovely room. It's a great end goal, but in the middle or the beginning of the project, it's not good to focus on you're trying to make it be beautiful, because there's a whole lot of work between piled up room and beautiful on the other end. So I want to encourage you to ignore the fancy pictures of the stuff that you think is going to be fabulous and your wish list and how beautiful it's going to be someday in the future. Just ignore those in the beginning, because you're going to have to plow your way through get rid of a bunch of stuff before you can start contemplating how you're going to make it pretty. So don't use them to torture yourself, I guess is what I'm saying. Of course, you can go back and have that be a goal ultimately, but when you're trying to get started, don't let that be part of the process, that you sit and look at pretty pictures and wish that your room looked that good instead of how it actually looks. And it'll make it easier for you to get started and get going, because it always gets worse before it gets better. I tell everybody that. When you've sort of compacted it into corners and made little stacks of stuff, and when we start tearing that stuff open and pulling it out, it always looks like a tornado went through before it actually works, before it actually makes a difference. And so you have to get past the unpack, tornado, chaos part of the process before you get to, oh, now there's less in here, now it looks better, now it will be, now I can picture a Martha Stewart room in here. Okay, she was, and I made this point because she really was judging herself very, very harshly, that she had this chaos over here and she wanted this pretty picture over here, and that she couldn't imagine the path from one to the other, and she was just beating herself up about, it doesn't look like the pictures, it doesn't look like the pictures. Like, yeah, you need to let that go for now and just worry about getting control in a way that is okay for you and the way that you can deal with it. So the last piece of advice today is about being really gentle and kind to yourself. If you're trying to face this stuff and it makes you super upset, then maybe that's not the stuff to start with. The truth is, you're just trying to make forward motion, and you can do that with any part of the project. So there's always something easier to start with. So maybe you don't want to start with the stuff that's super hard. Maybe you ended up with a box of kitchen stuff from your mother instead of her paperwork or her clothes, and the kitchen stuff is less upsetting than the clothes. Or maybe you've got your own piles of paper and you can deal with those easier than you can deal with your mother's stuff. So you can go through the process and say, okay, right now, I don't feel strong enough to deal with this. I can't deal with this stuff, but there's another project over here I can start on instead. And if you do that, you can get some practice and get some forward motion, and then you will feel like you can accomplish it. It's possible with training and practice, right? You just need a little exercise, a little repetitive success, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So if you can pick something that's less upsetting and start with that and do all the other tips that I told you and set the timer and remove yourself and whatever you need to do to process, go through with the stuff that's easy, and then you will have success, and you'll be later able to go and face the stuff that's harder. And if you get down to you've only got hard stuff, then it's time to take the sliver and go move the sliver somewhere else and work on that. My point is that you can tackle it, but you have to be kind to yourself. You have to deal with the clutter and the emotions that come from the clutter simultaneously. You can't just sort of plow over your emotions and stomp on them and keep going, because usually that's just going to backfire. If you force yourself to do something when you don't feel able or capable mentally, emotionally to do it, and you sort of stomp out your emotions for the day and plow forward, it's going to really blow up on you, and you're going to feel really, really unhappy later and much less likely to move forward a second time. So acknowledge that you have feelings and be kind about them, and just try to find the things that keep you moving forward in small increments in the interim. Eventually, despite your negative feelings, you can still get things done. You may not be super fast, you may not get it all done in a weekend, but that's the whole point of being kind to yourself. If you can't do it at the pace of someone who has no emotion about it, if I came to do it and I was plowing through your stuff, I could do it really fast, zoom, 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 and it could be done in a day or a weekend or a week of work. But you're not in that position. And so you have to acknowledge that you have a little bit more in the way and make some space to keep going despite that. And count it a win when you're able to get anything done at all. Because in the end, even if you only spent 15 minutes today, you're still 15 minutes farther down the road, right? And so you're still able to say, hey, I got 15 minutes done. And at the end of the week, maybe you got an hour done, and that's an hour more than it was last week, right? So you're just looking for incremental motion that doesn't completely shut you down. And hopefully these tips will help you do that. This is a process of managing your emotions without completely shutting down and completely sinking into the couch. And I think you can do it if you make small enough bites and you get support and you do it in little increments, and you'll be able to get there.
All right, thanks. Our July meetup is going to be Thursday, July 26th at a Healing Collective in Houston. And then
and we did, we're back to Thursdays from Wednesday. We actually got our Thursdays back. So we've shifted to Thursdays now for going forward.
And then in August, we'll be online again on Tuesday, the 21st. I want to remind everybody that if you want to get announcements about when we do these things, you can join the meetup group, even if you're not in Houston, meetup.com/Houston-clutter-coaching.
Right.
You can also find us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/the Clutter Fairy. Okay, I guess that's it for now.
Thanks, everybody.